On August 6, 2024, Congressman Mike Garcia of California's 27th District held a town hall event at College of the Canyons in Santa Clarita. This is a special presentation from Santa Clarita star of the event.
Okay, I'll talk about what underpins my philosophy here, what I call the 4 C's. We'll talk about that here in a second. But the old saying of all politics is local. My job is to represent you at the federal level and vote accordingly and making sure that we're taking care of national security. We'll talk about that word security a lot tonight because that's the great unifier. I don't care if you're on the far left or the far right of the spectrum, we all care about security, and that underpins the decisions along with what I call the 4 C's. But constituent services remains the priority. You see the metrics here. We have handled 4,500 casework packages and closed these packages, and we'll give you examples of what these look like. It equates to roughly $5 million worth of money being returned back to you as constituents, as taxpayers, as people that got screwed by the IRS, who didn't get your benefits from the VA. You shouldn't have to call your congressman to get help from the VA. But sometimes you do, and it's an honor to do that. By the way, can we just have all veterans stand up and law enforcement stand up? In some countries, it's wild for their citizens to think that they could have a forum where you can have 500 people in a room with differences of opinion and have it be civil and peaceful, and you know, there may be some emotion tonight. I get that. I hope there is. That's good. That's passion. But we're blessed to be Americans, to be able to have forums like this, and it's because of our veterans, and on a daily basis, because of our sheriffs, especially in our district, that provide that security blanket. So thank you for that. $82 million plus in community project funding. This is a fancy word for earmark. We'll detail all that out here. We responded to about 21,000 emails, phone calls. We had a gentleman say, you know, we weren't answering his phone call. It was in the middle of a parade route, and I pulled him out on the parade route, stopped the parade. I said, what's your name? We got his information, and we made sure that we were getting a response to him ASAP. 851 meetings. I spent half my life in D.C., half my life here in the district. Which means a third of my time here in the district is in Santa Clarita, a third is in the Antelope Valley, and a third is in the San Fernando Valley. And while I'm here for that half of my life, I'm meeting with schools, I'm meeting with superintendents, I'm meeting with small businesses, literally anyone that has a need or has something that's creating jobs, creating the economic engines for our local communities, or needs any kind of help at all. 851 of those meetings. And what's cool is we retrieved 164 medals for veterans who, got out and 930 of those in 3 years. So, by the way, the federal government is still not completely back at work, so that's part of the problem. On the left, you have things that are wrong with California. And I want to be very clear because this has been misinterpreted in the past. I love California. It's why I'm here. It's where I've raised my family. It's where I was raised. I have no intentions of leaving California. But boy, does Sacramento make it hard to stay in California. I love the weather. I love the geography, the people, the jobs. We have all the ingredients to include the energy to literally, from a GDP perspective, to be in the top 3 in the world. Sometimes we're 5, sometimes we're 7. But even with those things, we still have some of the worst infrastructure. We have the highest taxes, the highest homeless rates, some of the lowest education. I think our schools are ranked something like 41 or 43rd. That's not because of the teachers, that's because of the bureaucracy above them in Sacramento. So my goal isn't to, and my mission, literally my job, is not to fix California, okay? And I say that because many of you will ask questions tonight, and you will have complaints about things that are happening at the state level, things that are happening at the county level. There's a lot to complain about the county right now, or the city. My job is to prevent the country from turning into what California has become, and it's a function of that. And I'm happy to debate any of these things. If you guys have questions on any of these metrics, we can talk about it. But a good example is what I call Frank and Rail. You may or may not have heard this term. This is a term that I will copyright and trademark and probably end up making money on later, but not as much money as we spent on high-speed rail. We have spent billions of dollars on this project called high-speed rail. Literally hundreds of millions of tons of concrete have been put up throughout the state of California, from one random place to another, point A to point G, but there's really no ridership demand there. And what people don't realize, and we didn't really realize this even ourselves until the last year or so, is that after spending hundreds of billions of dollars, and Scott, I don't know, where's Scott? What's the total of high-speed rail that we've spent roughly so far? 120 billion. Oh, sorry, that's what you make charts, right? I can see the we have spent $120 billion so far on high-speed rail. Not a single mile, not a single foot of rail has actually been laid down. And this thing is planned to come right through Santa Clarita Valley, through the Antelope Valley, through the 14 corridor, and then through basically our district, right through the heart of our district. Okay, so one, it's fraud, waste, and abuse. There's no ridership. It doesn't know. I call it Frankenrail because it's this like ugly giant monster that doesn't. It's made of disparate parts. It doesn't know what it is, and it's meandering through all these villages and scaring the hell out of all the people that live there. Right? Literally, everyone that they're building this thing is protesting because they're building what looks to be the Death Star in their backyard, and no one wants it. And by the way, you're not going to get the money out of it. So we just introduced a bill yesterday that prevents the federal funding. Which, by the way, about 75% of the money for high-speed rail is from the federal government, so it's still your taxpayer money. The other 25% is California, your taxpayer money too. And so this bill will not allow the federal government to spend $1 on any high-speed rail project that is effectively not real or hasn't laid a mile of railroad. Okay, and this is not. I want to be clear, this isn't me saying we don't, high-speed rails are bad things. This particular one is a bad one. I support the one going from the AV to Vegas. That will have demand, that will have ridership, it will get used. This one goes from Modesto to some other random city in the Central Valley that no one wants to go to, and there's no ROI when you spend this type of money. Okay, so we're going to help hopefully prevent the waste of federal taxpayer funds on that. We just introduced that yesterday, and it will be bipartisan support. I talked about why I do what I do. The four things that underpin everything I do are the 4 C's. The Constitution, capitalism, free market competition, and the 4 C is charity. If we can look through the lens of these four C's on every issue, we can actually solve a lot of the country's problems. All right. So you're going to ask questions. I'm going to reference the Constitution tonight. You're going to ask questions. I'm going to reference capitalism with competition. By the way, you can't have capitalism without competition. That's how you end up with high Medicare costs like we have right now, and that's going to be a lot of the questions asked tonight. Why is health care so damn expensive? Because we have, frankly, not enough competition, and it's not really a capitalist infrastructure and industry is being regulated, overtaxed, overregulated, and we've got some discussions around that. There we go. Oh no, we got the good Lord, we got Army. It's going to be louder on you guys in the town halls. What happened? You infiltrated. Thank you for your service, sir. This is something cool. We've never done this before. We're going to do this on a quarterly basis. It's called the Community Champion Award. And what I recognized as I've gone to local areas, I'm hearing all these stories of heroism and selflessness and people giving back to the community. People who have literally put their lives on the line. We've been talking about how to do this correctly, and we figured tonight was the right way to kick this thing off. So the Community Champion Award, it's presented to an individual that's basically made a significant or measurable contribution to preserve the security of our community and made them put their lives on the line in a manner, or in some cases just went above and beyond to help others rather than themselves, right? Not just charity, but also service. And so tonight I'm going to ask two very special gentlemen. We recognized all of our deputies earlier, and you guys know I'm a big supporter of law enforcement. There's not enough that we can do for our local sheriffs in Santa Clarita, the Antelope Valley, and our LAPD officers in the San Fernando Valley. But one there's not enough that we can do, there's more than we should be doing, and I'm very disappointed right now in the county, effectively the entire county, for not taking care of our sheriffs better. This defund the police movement had irreparable damage. These gentlemen are working, and ladies are working 40 hours a week, plus in some cases another 40, 60 hours of overtime every week. The academy classes are maybe pumping out 12 cadets every 2 or 3 months, and about half of them end up going and working in Ventura County. So they're not getting the relief. We saw Ryan Klinkenbroomer get executed in the streets of Palmdale just within the last year, broad daylight. So the conditions these folks are working under are very strenuous. We need to do more for our law enforcement. So God bless you guys. But these two... Sergeant Reddy and then Deputy Nurse to please come up. These two gentlemen, come on guys, I know you don't want to do this. Sorry, thanks for coming again. Nurse, good to see you. These two guys are very humble. I met them at the Lancaster Sheriff Station up in the Antelope Valley, and it's been a difficult environment up there. Back on August 15th of last year, right, 2023, there was a single car that driver had some issues. I'll say, lost control of the vehicle, hit an electrical power box, and immediately that power box ignited, exploded. The car caught on fire. Was overturned. He was basically, the driver was displaced from his seat. He had an open skull fracture basically, and was in basically a situation where he was going to die in a matter of seconds. These two gentlemen pulled up. The car was already fully engulfed in flames. When you see the full video, we're not going to show the full video here because it's powerful, but we're going to show you the video of the acts of bravery. This is Medal of Honor type stuff where I come from, and they ran to a burning car that was sitting on an electrical box with a tank full of gas, and literally put themselves into that burning car because they had to physically remove the guy who wasn't necessarily cooperating. And they extracted him from this vehicle, dragged him to safety, and that car literally, had it been 5 seconds later, the driver would have been completely incinerated and would not have survived that. So these two gentlemen saved a life of one of our citizens who whether he knows it or not, these were his guardian angels at night, and they represent the entire sheriff's department. They do things on a daily basis that either put their own lives on the line or save others' lives in the service that they do. So, gentlemen, thank you for And with that, I know watching this video is hard for you guys, so but I think it's important for people to see. This is Cardinals. So there you go. Up to it, and obviously in the moment, literally within 3 seconds, that gentleman would not have survived. So congratulations for your heroism, guys, and thank you for your leadership. Appreciate it. Another cool thing we have in our competition, high school students can apply. The winner of the art competition has their piece hung in the halls of Congress in the corridor that we walk to the floor to vote. This year we had a young lady, Alex Coons from Acton. Alex, where are you? Please stand up, Alex. She got a free trip to DC DC got to come home after a couple of days, luckily for her, and her painting is now in the halls underneath the Capitol there. It's pretty cool, and I'll show you the piece here in a second. But from Vasquez High, and then you got mom and dad here, right? You got Justin and Anna, and then your brother Adam, who I didn't get to meet out in DC. So good to see you guys. And here is her piece, which you can see is pretty fun. So in the district, we talked about 851 meetings. Just an example. If you want us to come visit businesses, if you want us to come visit your organization, please reach out to our office. We're happy to do that. In DC, just a reminder, I'm on these 3 committees. These committees, to be honest, I pinch myself still to this day. These are committees that people who have been in office for 12, 15 years still want to be on. They want to be an appropriator. They want to be on the permanent select committee on intelligence. They want to be on science-based technology. For our district, there's no better committees to be on. I'm on the defense subcommittee within appropriation, and as you guys know, aerospace and defense is literally the majority of the economic revenue in our district. So to be in that position as an appropriator, to also be science-based and technology with all the NASA and Plant 42 stuff, and all of the supply chains underneath us in Santa Clarita, I'm in a very unique spot, and I'm blessed to be there. And obviously, my background as a naval aviator, but also my background as a defense contractor, and I bring a subject matter expertise that is well fitted for these committees. But I cut in front of a lot of old timers that weren't happy necessarily I was there until they saw the results and they understand why now. So this is good for our district. I put this chart up. It was an interesting splatter chart, right? Those little dots, all the gray ones, there's 435. That's every single member of Congress. And I'll let you pick your favorite, whether it's AOC and MTG, and you can figure out where they are on this map. But I'm that little red dot, okay? This is based on tens of thousands of votes over a certain period of time. This is just the last 2 years worth, so a couple thousand votes on this chart. But my position on this scatter chart has been relatively stable, okay? And on the vertical axis, it's other votes, and on the bottom, so think of social programs, social policy issues that we vote on. And on the bottom, it's economic and redistributive. Basically, think of money issues, right? So from a fiscal conservative policy or social conservative policy, this is where I fall. This is factual data that is currently backed up and updated on a daily basis by every vote that we take on the floor. So the point of this isn't to argue with anyone here. This is facts. Some of you want me to be further right. Some of you want me to be further left. I am who I am, and I believe in what I believe, and it's anchored to the 4 C's that we talked about, primarily the Constitution, and above all things, the security of our country. And I do what's right based on the security of our country, our neighborhoods, and we'll get into those facets. My dad, before he passed away just 2 years ago, he said, son, you're an umpire. You call balls and strikes. And when I vote, I have a yes or no. I don't have a no, but if I could do this, I would, right? I don't have that. I have to vote yes, I have to vote no, and I won't vote present. That's an option because I think that's a spineless way to legislate. So there's some people that do that. By the way, I won't miss a vote. I have missed votes. There's reasons for it, but my batting average is higher than about 95% of the members of Congress. So my job here tonight is to explain the yeses and the nos, but this is where I fall on the political spectrum. Okay. There's people out there that are going to say I'm extreme far right or that I'm not far right enough. This is ground truth. The quote on the bottom left is from the New York Times, who, I'm not a big fan of them, they're not a big fan of me, but they did make this observation about me in terms of a very short list of legislators who do actually work across the aisle. And while I may not vote the same way as the party across the aisle, I understand, especially when you're in the minority, you need their support. You got it. And we'll talk about a bill that I got passed while I was in the majority that helped the military. And this is one of our constituents who's a Democrat who, obviously didn't agree with every vote, but this was her perspective on me. And so this is why I do what I do. This is why we need to communicate. Some people vote and think and rationalize with their heart. Some people do the same with their mind. and we don't all speak the same vernacular, but the great unifying word is security, and that's the focus of the next few charts here as we go through this. Real quick, again, just testimony of bipartisanship. By the way, I don't think bipartisanship is a bad thing. I think it's necessary, especially in this very caustic environment, to work across the aisle. If someone is crazy and they are clearly wrong, I will not work with them on that particular issue, right? But and so we don't compromise our value. I don't compromise my values and my principles, and I think I've even signed on to an AOC bill at some point. What was the issue on that? Yeah, deep fake stuff. I got you even got on an AOC bill. So G and I don't think we're doing anything else. But top 30% in terms of bipartisanship. That's me with Salud Carbajal. We'll talk about the bill that he and I wrote it. He agreed to help me get it through when he was in the majority and I was in the minority. We'll talk about the benefit of that. And just the other day, I did a podcast with Jimmy Panetta, who's former naval officer. He's a Democrat. He's rational, and we talked about the crime problem in California, especially the smash and grabs and Prop 47. We'll talk about Prop 47. And for this 45-minute podcast, we literally said the same thing about this one issue and reiterated it over and over again. Okay. Now we don't vote the same way, but we're not working in Sacramento either. But he agreed that what's happening in Sacramento is crazy, and that what the legislators are doing up there has gotten very extreme. And to hear a colleague across the aisle basically say the exact same things that I've been saying about Prop 47 and things like AB 109 and Prop 57 was very refreshing. So the more we talk, the more we understand we actually have more in common. The problem is there's all these other forces that try to divide us, right? So we have to consciously sometimes force ourselves to do podcasts so that we can understand where the solution is and not just where the separations are. In the end, we all want security. There's more than these 7. This is how I view everything that I vote on. Every issue, every appropriations bill, every law that comes, up, every issue, I view it through these 7 buckets. Okay, these are, to me, and they're kind of in the order that I think is a priority in terms of my job at the federal level. So we're going to walk through each one of these and what it means, and then I'll try to wrap this up as much as we can so we get to Q&A. Economic security. Right now, the number one thing we're going to talk about tonight is how painful the economy is, how inflation is kicking us all in the butt, how we are paying higher taxes, higher insurance premiums. We can't afford to pay for anything. I've got a chart that illustrates all of that. I introduced an Inflation Prevention Act, which basically says any time that the year-over-year inflation rate is above 4.5%, Congress cannot introduce legislation that actually increases discretionary spending. Okay, and that would have fixed our problem. We'll talk about it here in a second. Mine is the Inflation Prevention Act, which actually would have helped to prevent inflation. The one that got signed into law that I voted against was the Inflation Reduction Act, which the president at the time actually conceded was never meant to actually combat inflation. Those are his words. You can go find those. So spending more does not mitigate inflation. You have to cut costs and do growth measures. Now, that cutting does not come at the expense of Social Security, Medicare, or VA benefits. Okay, and it doesn't come at the expense of our citizens. We voted for single subject bills. It's crazy. Normally they package them all up into one thing, and then they put a gun to your head and say you got to vote for this $1.9 trillion package. And there's 60% of the stuff you love, 40% of the stuff you hate, and you're in a position where you upset everyone, basically, regardless of how you vote. So we have gotten back to single subject bills, meaning that we will only vote on the DOD bill, we will only vote on the That is actually a big deal and unprecedented in Congress, and I'll show you another chart that's unprecedented here in a second. SALT Fairness Act. Everyone in this room is impacted by SALT in some form or another. The state and local tax reduction. 2017, there was a tax cut bill that was signed into law under the Trump administration. 90% of that bill was great. It was lower taxes for every bracket, for every tax bracket. It doubled the standard deduction for families, married couples, single people, and it was a pro-growth tax bill. The 10% that sucked for us as Californians and New Yorkers was to pay for some of those things. They put a cap in there that made it so that you can only deduct up to $10,000 a year on your federal tax return as a result of state taxes, local taxes, etc., right? So if you own a home in a city like Santa Clarita where the median home value is at least $600,000, and you have a job where your income tax is at least 8%, you hit that $10,000 cap basically by owning a home and having a job. And it's not fair. That is disproportionately affecting California, it's disproportionately affecting New York, and that may have been the intent. But I'm not okay with that. And by the way, it's affecting Texas now because they've got high property taxes, everyone's home values have gone up. Yeah. It's affecting a lot of states that back in 2017 weren't affected. So my bill removes the SALT cap limit altogether. I would be willing to negotiate with any party or any entity who wants to either double it or make it so that a married couple can deduct up to $20K instead of just $10K. But the $10K limit right now is arbitrary, it's capricious, it's penalizing blue states, which I live in. I love this state, I don't want to leave, I want to continue to be able to afford here just like you all do as well. So we're going to continue to make this one of our #1 issues when it comes to economic security. I'm a PowerPoint geek and I'm an Excel spreadsheet nerd, so bear with me, okay? So this blue line is what the government has spent from the years 2008 to 2019 on what's called discretionary spending. So this is actually the money that Congress has control over. Okay, not mandatory spending. This doesn't include Social Security. By the way, Congress can't actually touch Social Security. So this narrative that Mike is trying to cut Social Security or in some way jeopardizing Medicare, no one in Congress can do that right now. It's mandatory spending that is a product of the executive branch as well. That it's not just the legislative branch. This is the discretionary spending that we approve and we budget and pass bills every year, usually late because it's a very split government right now. But you can see for roughly 11, 12 years, it was flat. That's actually not what most people realize. The government, from a year-to-year basis, spent about $1.3 trillion a year. And all of a sudden, 2019, you see that tick up. Okay, and with that uptick, you've got the CARES Act, which was all the COVID money. In 2011, in this blue line, you've got the America Rescue Plan, which didn't rescue us from anything. And you've got the Inflation Reduction Act, which didn't do a damn thing to reduce inflation. Okay, so the annual 1.3 turned into 1.5, turned into 1.7, turned into 1.8, and then we put these three bills over top of those things, which added up to $6 trillion. So that leads to, effectively, within a 3 or 4 year period, a $10 to $11 trillion operating budget. So it's like a business, or it's like your home where you normally, if you make $100,000, you spend hopefully $90K. All of a sudden, for 3 years, you decide, I'm going to spend, $600K. Well, you can maybe do that for 1 year and take out a loan and survive. You can't do that for 3 years without going bankrupt or becoming insolvent. That's what our government did. This is why I voted against some of these bills, because these weren't good spending bills. And in many of these cases, there weren't enough human beings to actually execute this money. And in many of these cases, the states ended up having to give the money back to the federal government because they couldn't obligate and execute. When Newsom advertises that he went from a $70 billion surplus in FY23, and then just in the last 6 months says in FY24, we're operating in a $40 billion, $50 billion deficit, it's because he had to cough up all this federal money. Okay, so this is why we have that. The red line is the inflation that goes with it, so it makes sense. We have all this cash out there and all this spending going wild. The cumulative inflation effect during this period since 2019 is 23%. That doesn't, just because the line comes down to 3.5%, it doesn't bring the cost of things down. We have to actually go negative now on inflation, which is called deflation, which is also called a depression or a recession in order to get costs back. So you are effectively paying 25% more than you did just 4 years ago because of the excess spending. That's what I'm talking about when we're talking about fighting. Community projects, I don't want to spend too much time on this. These are earmarks. I don't care if you can call them whatever you want, they're earmarks. This is how I can directly put money into the district. We've had 33 projects be approved. We have more in the queue for this fiscal year. 90% of them or more are being approved and actually executed, yielding about $82 million. And then the request for FY25, you can see, is totaling $28 million. We'll talk about some of the projects. You can read them there. COC itself, we got money, a few million dollars for an advanced technology center to help train people in aerospace production, which is a huge gap right now for the workforce. We've gotten an earmark for servicing students who are homeless, who want to go to school, to help get them trained, to help get them the resources they need to go to a fine institution like COC. And you can see all these things here. So these are the three that specifically are for College of the Canyons, which is just where we happen to be. We can go to any part of the district, and you will see that there's an earmark with a substantial amount of money that we have gotten behind it. That is the district in gray. All those dots are where the earmarks have been executed. There's two here in the sort of downtown LA area, Beverly Hills. That's Children's Hospital. We got a couple $1 million to get hardware that helps cure leukemia for kids. So it's not in our district, but that's where your kids go if they've got leukemia. These kids are surviving. We keep asking Acton and Hollywood also to submit their requests. If you guys got any good ideas, there are rules, there are limits, and we've got things. But these are the 33 projects and the dollar values for Santa Clarita specifically. You can see that these are all on our website. We have to publicly disclose these. There's conflict of interest stuff that we make sure that we're clean on, and so you can go access this on our website if you want to. You click on the little button and it pops up, and all the little details show up. It's kind of nice. So. And we always encourage people to talk to our office if they have ideas. This is the Antelope Valley. We got a lot of stuff for the Sheriff's Department on the annual basis. So if they can't get the full funds that they need from the county, we fill in the gaps and buy them hardware and radios and stuff like that. So that's a big deal. But that's a lot of money. Neighborhood security. I introduced the Steve Owen bill, which basically Sergeant Steve Owen was executed a while back in the streets of the Antelope Valley, broad daylight, just like Ryan Klinkenbrunner was last year. This bill basically makes it a federal felony with a punishment of no less than the death penalty or life in prison if you kill a cop.
Yes.
That should be a no-brainer. It's got bipartisan support, and if you kill a cop, you should go to prison for life or be executed. Violence Against Women Act, I'm a co-sponsor of that. This is basically allowing women who are victims of domestic violence to have the resources, to have the recourse, to be able to fight, and to have the federal level protections in place to make sure that they don't get further abused or victimized as a result of them having the courage and coming forward. So this is a big deal. Not very many Republicans are on this Violence Against Women Act thing, and I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of it. Folks in the Antelope Valley will have a picture of this. It was wild back in 2021. It was the Wild West up there, and these illegal marijuana groves. By the way, I'm not an anti-marijuana guy. It's legal in California. I don't do it myself because I'm a federal employee. But there are legal businesses in California literally going out of business because of these black market illegal marijuana grows, and I'll show you what it looks like. But we completely eradicated the outdoor $1.2 billion worth of weed that we worked with LA sheriffs on. They went out and did these raids. We got to ride the bulldozers and knock these tents down. You'll see it was absolutely insane. And a lot of them have gone to indoors, but we fixed that. We fixed that problem. We've got Prop 47 coming up. As you guys know, it's going to be on the ballot. Prop 47 was the state bill that made a felony a misdemeanor, and then made misdemeanors basically slaps on the wrist. This is why we have the crime sprees that we have. We need to end Prop 47. It's also driving the homelessness issues because people aren't getting enough help. Please pay attention to that. That's a state issue that I'll be very vocal about that. Combating the Fentanyl Poisonings Act. We've got families in here who have lost their loved ones right here, and this poison of fentanyl is coming across our border. 75,000 deaths a year in the country as a result of fentanyl poisonings. This is very sensitive because I've met with a lot of the families, and I'm very sensitive about the issue that these are poison. These kids don't know that they're taking necessarily fentanyl. They think they're taking Oxycontin, Adderall, or some drug that they think is a prescription drug that they may have acquired from a friend or through an app. Literally everything that's not prescribed and not legal now is basically made with fentanyl. And these aren't chemists that are making these pills. So what this does is effectively gives more resources at the federal level to local agencies, but it also gives more resources to local schools to help educate children on the threat of fentanyl. So please, the bottom line, the message to parents, and you know, we have victim survivors that we can chat with afterwards if you like. Would like to hear this experience. We all know someone that's been a victim of this, but talk to your kids about it. They should not be taking any pills that are not prescribed to them that you are not aware of. That's I don't care if they're 30 years old. They shouldn't be. They will eventually be exposed to this very lethal poison. Fire Weather Development Act, we'll talk about that here in a second. This was basically an effort to give more resources, more technology to the fire. We're going to have a tough fire season this year, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Wildland firefighters, we have any wildland firefighters here tonight? These guys are making like 50% of what the county firefighters are making and what the Cal State firefighters are making. So we need, and half of our district is actually federal land where the wildland firefighters are working. So they are literally having to quit to go work for someone else that's paying almost double just to make ends meet and live in Southern California. So we've got an initiative to get them basically level set with the local county and state firefighters as well. And then PSPS. You guys even remember PSPS? These power shutoffs, right? This is something, before I was even in Congress, I went up to Acton in Agua Dulce. Agua Dulce had 4 days where they had no power, and their wells are actually electrically driven, so they had no water as well. And I railed on Edison. I was, I was very blunt, and I was very aggressive with Edison. But this turned out to be a pretty good news story, and I want to actually thank SoCal Edison. We've got a chart here. I think it's the next slide. Yeah. Since we have partnered together from my office in Edison, and Rochelle, are you here tonight? Rochelle.
She is.
Oh, there she is. Right, way back. Can you stand up? You want to stand up? Miss Rochelle is from Southern California. Rochelle Silsby, and you can see the metrics here. We haven't had an actual full-on power shutoff in the last couple of years, and a lot of it was just recognizing that these PSPSs, these thresholds were set too low, was impacting our constituents in a certain way that was very dangerous. And then the other half of this is Edison, making a commitment to harden the grids, to put the insulators on our power lines, and at a very high, disproportionate value they invested in our district, especially given the wildlands in our area and the remoteness of Acton, Agua Dulce, Santa Clarita, the population density, losing that much power all the time. The 92% reduction in the value since 2020, from 2020 to 2023. And I just remember one warning even, and it was like 50-mile-an-hour winds, which you got to go, okay, that's a legitimate, warning at that point. But thank you, Edison, for committing to it and then executing on it. And then I want to say like 60% of the money spent on hardening the grid was actually spent in our district. We only represent like 15% of our our folks in Val Verde, Castaic, and other areas are being affected by this. I want you to know I am still fighting this fight on a daily basis. We need to stop operations there, except for the local waste collections. I want to stop all operations until the reaction site. This thing is operating. There's a part of Chiquita Canyon landfill that is operating at 250 degrees below the surface temperatures when it should be at about 130. Okay, there's fumes. There's toxic odors coming out. It's not just bad smells like a trash site. It's actually toxic benzene levels and other caustic VOCs. So they need to stop operations there, except for Burtec and other unincorporated areas in our district, to allow our folks to not be affected by trash services. Pivot all that headcount to rectifying, getting the root cause, figuring out how to fix this problem. I don't believe just putting tarps down. I don't believe just doing the stuff that they have been doing is going to solve this problem. We've got to figure out the physics behind this chemical reaction, and then people need to be held accountable for it. If there was malfeasance and people covering it up, we need to be held accountable. But Mike, this isn't a federal issue. Why are you getting involved? Why are you poking the, why are you being so mean to the county supervisors? It's because it's my backyard. I am a constituent. I care about this. You guys, I've seen firsthand in Val Verde and Cass State the health struggles that people are having as a result of this. And oh, by the way, we did now get the EPA involved, so at the federal level, we have a big, adult and legal health. There's a relief program at Chiquita Canyon. The company that owns the dump put this relief program in, and it was like a black box. They asked you to apply, but they asked you for your name and basically your address. And then they come back to you and go, well, you get $500, and then someone down the street gets $4,500. There's an algorithm, but they won't share it with us. There's a formula that they use. So I called their lawyer and had a very frank discussion with him last week, and he basically said, Mike, I'm not going to tell you what the formula is. And I go, yeah, well, I'm going to tell my constituents that you are not being transparent. You've got a self-serving formula here with no rhyme or reason. It's very arbitrary. It's very capricious, meaning you're helping some and you're penalizing others. And that's a legal implication. There's legal implications to that. So they committed to going to, and they're leaning towards, they haven't committed 100% to do this, but to go to a reimbursement plan so that if you're displaced from your home or if you're incurring costs as a result of the Chiquita landfill issue, you will be reimbursed for those costs and not just some arbitrary number that they decide or think that you deserve. And that's a more fair and more transparent process. So we're gonna help them get there. And we're gonna keep pushing them along. But and by the way, that's not the panacea. That's not going to solve the problem. It's just one facet of relief for the constituents. The county needs to be doing more. The county health office needs to be more engaged. And we need the elected officials at every level to recognize that this needs to be shut down until we figure out what's going on there, because they also want to grow this dump, this landfill, which is, there's no way in hell they're going to be able to do that with what's going on right there. This is what one of the illegal grows. This is one of the smaller ones in the Antelope Valley. This is like probably 50 acres of illegal marijuana, and you walk in there and you want Doritos right away, just smelling it. This is, before Team Garcia and the sheriffs, and after Team Garcia and the sheriffs. And border security, this is, in my opinion, one of the biggest threats for our national security. We now have 11 million people who are here illegally that we don't have full documentation for. This is a result of this administration's policies. This was a man-made problem. I haven't been doing everything from a congressional perspective. We have passed laws that it is already illegal to enter the country illegally. Okay, so it's not that there's not enough laws, it's just that we have an administration right now that is literally not enforcing the laws despite the Supreme Court telling them they have to. We've passed H.R. 2, 13,000 pounds of fentanyl were seized in just one incident. We've had 46 fentanyl-related deaths in our district alone this year. Okay, and what is this, August? I think we had like 97, close to 100 deaths last year throughout our district. So this is a real problem, and we now have a 2,000% increase in illegal immigrants who have come from China, and this isn't picking on any ethnicity. This is pointing out the fact that we have our peer adversary that has nuclear weapons and a plan to fight us at some point and take over Taiwan, entering our country at exponential rates illegally. And legal immigration is great. We talked about that. We need that. But what's happening now is not okay. National security, we go on and on about this. One of the cool things I talked about, bipartisan, Military Spouse Licensing Relief Act. We got that signed into law. That is now the law of the land. Spouses of the military. If you're a nurse, doctor, teacher, anything with a license, you can get orders from one state to another, and your spouse doesn't have to get requalified to pay for recertification. So that's good for us because now we get more teachers, nurses, and doctors. Probably enough lawyers, but it actually doesn't apply to lawyers because there's different laws in every state, so they do need to get recertified. So And then I also secured the highest pay raise for our junior enlisted in American history. It's something like 28%. Normally the pay raises are 3 to 5%, and we got 20% raise in 1 year, and we're gonna keep doing that, especially for our junior enlisted who are currently making, before this, we're making about $12 an hour, which is half of what an in-and-out worker makes. That's insane. We can talk about Israel. There'll be questions about that. We got to stand with Israel. You guys have seen me be very vocal about that, and we're going to do that. National security. This is a cool picture. I don't know why he's looking at me like that, but this is the Secretary of the Air Force actually came to California 27, and we hosted the inaugural North LA Defense Forum, where we had 80 businesses, aerospace businesses, show up and actually grill him and tell him the problems that they're having and what they need in order to go faster, to produce weapons faster, and take care of our industrial base issues. And so it's pretty cool to have the Secretary of the Air Force actually come to Plant 42, right at the epicenter and really, the backbone of our economic engine, and address these issues. And we had the chairman of the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, Ken Calvert, come up as well. So this was a powerful event, and that Plant 42 is now, there's jobs looking for people now, rather than people looking for jobs. And we have done, we got a lot of opportunities there that trickle down to Santa Clarita as well. School safety, I want to just talk about this. I introduced a bill called Cash to Classrooms Act. I don't know if everyone knows this, but there's only 5 states in the country that calculate school funding based on attendance. And lo and behold, California is one of them, right? Upside down on everything. So what happens is, if a school only has 90% attendance, they only get 90% of the funding that the state budgeted for them. So you're penalizing the schools, you're penalizing the teachers, you're penalizing the bus drivers, the students, the classrooms, the technology. And so I introduced a bill that basically, from a federal perspective, will prevent states from tapping into federal funds unless they get away from this average daily allowance construct. If you budget for it, it should go to the schools. And the sad part is that there's actually people in Sacramento rooting for kids not to go to school because they get paid, right? That 10% decrement coming out of our school districts is going up to bureaucrats and different pots of money in Sacramento. This could be a 10% raise for teachers. This can be buying more buses. This could be buying more security for our schools, more technology, more infrastructure, however the schools want to use it. Also introduced the Safe Schools Act, which takes unspent COVID funds, billions of dollars, and actually funds school resource officers, so these security officers on school campuses. And the way the bill is written is basically for every 500 students, it's required to have 2 SROs. So if your school has 700 students, you have 4 SROs on campus at all time. They can be uniformed, they can be ununiformed, armed, unarmed, whatever the school wants. But the fact that members of Congress have more security in their offices than our kids, who are more precious, in my opinion, have in their schools is wrong. And we got to figure out how to pay for that. The federal government needs to do that. So that's what this bill does. Did that vote take place today? It's supposed to. So the county, by the way, is voting either today or tomorrow. So call the supervisors to remove SROs from all LA County schools, which is insane to me. So please call your supervisors and make sure your voice is heard on this issue. We know the parental rights challenges that we've got. I want to raise my kids. I don't want the state to raise my kids. I want the schools to teach my kids academics, and I'll teach them principles, values, and everything else I think is important. This movie, 1955, is absolutely insane, but this basically makes it now illegal for schools to notify parents if their minor child is undergoing a gender transition, which is, it's insane to me that the state would take over that kind of control and take it away from parents. Social Security, I think I've said this enough, but the bottom line, I will not support any bills that jeopardize Social Security in Medicare. Okay? That is, I've introduced bills that make sure there's no fraud, waste, and abuse, and introduced bills to make sure those are all fortified. This is your contract with the federal government. It's your money. You paid into it. You deserve to get what you signed up to. The terms and conditions of that contract need to be honored by the federal government. And oh, by the way, as a federal legislator on the Appropriations Committee, even I, as per the Constitution, don't have the ability to cut your Social Security. That requires the president to be involved. So don't worry about that happening, but I want you to know that I would do everything I can to make sure from a legislative perspective that we do protect your Social Security. The problem is it's just not buying. It's buying 75% of what it used to even just 3 years ago. Election security, it should be a big deal to everyone, regardless of party, right? First of all, it's a terrible picture of me, so you don't wear glasses in real life. That's just me trying to look smarter. Voter Integrity and Defense Act basically requires some form of ID before you vote. That's the reason. 35 out of the 50 states already require some form of ID to vote, so this isn't unreasonable. By the way, California is not one of them. It's reasonable. Everyone should have the right to vote. If you're a legal citizen, your vote should be counted with 100% confidence, and your vote should only be counted once. Political partisanship. By the way, this did pass the administration committee, the House Administration Committee, a couple weeks ago, so this is going to get traction. And then we did just pass what's called the SAVE Act in the House. This hopefully will get picked up by the Senate, but it effectively does the same thing. It does a couple other things for election integrity. It's a big deal, and obviously California is probably the loosest in terms of election integrity laws, and we're trying to prevent that from happening at the federal level. Fighting for veterans. If you haven't figured out I'm a pro-veteran guy, then you probably should read this chart, but I am a pro-veteran guy. I will do anything, move bend over backwards for our veterans. This quote's pretty funny. I won't say who said this, but a member of Congress. We got a new facility started up in the Antelope Valley. It's going to be a full-service medical treatment facility, so that the folks in Santa Clarita and the Antelope Valley don't have to drive down to Brentwood to see the VA. They've already started that process. And again, this is because we kept going to their offices and giving them a hard time and inspiring them to help us. So that this will open hopefully within a couple years. August of 2025 is the promised opening date. This is supposed to be a full service, no kidding, VA clinic in our district. That quote is another member of Congress who has been in Congress for about 15 years now or so, and he/she, I won't put a name, a gender or name to it, made that comment basically saying, it took me 10 years to get this, and Garcia got it in 2, and that was in a meeting with the VA with all of us there sitting there. I'm like, hey, sorry, squeaky wheel, we're going to get the VA center. So that's a big deal. That saves you 2 hours of commute drive if you're a veteran in Santa Clarita. It saves about 3 hours for someone in legislative wins, atmospheric rivers, these are all the big rains. We got a bill passed to get more technologies to predict those through AI, do forecast modeling. Military spouse licensing we talked about. Bill Reynolds, who was a dear friend of mine, a Vietnam veteran, a war hero. He did more for our veterans, probably human beings. We got that post office right there on McBean named after him. So we're going to do a big ceremony on August 27th at 9:30 in the morning in the parking lot, renaming that post office to Bill Reynolds Memorial Post Office. It's kind of cool. So you're all invited to that. We talked about the pay raise, Fire Weather Development Act. We talked about that as well. 3 or 4 out of these 5 are actually bipartisan laws or bills, and these are testimonies of working together across the aisle. Victories in our community. This was a gentleman who got stuck in Ukraine with his family during the worst part of the invasion in Kiev. We got him, his family, and his dog actually out of there. Again, there was Charles working that. We talked about Bill Reynolds already. We've talked about the service academies. About 55 have been nominated now and are doing well. This City of Hope mobile van was one of the earmarks. It's available in Santa Clarita. This allows, it's literally a van that's got all of the cancer screening devices in it. So if you need a mammogram, pap smear, they come to you. And it's meant to service lower income neighborhoods or areas where it's more difficult to get to medical facilities. It's effectively free. And that was our earmark. So we'll get that scheduled. It's making its rounds, going to different locations. But if you contact City of Hope, you can find out where that's going. And that's already starting to save lives. Then we got a young lady. We talked about charity as part of the 4 C's. Berkeley, if you want to stand up, Miss Berkeley Nunez started a nonprofit here in the Santa Clarita Valley. You don't know why you're applauding it. She started a nonprofit charity organization that collects funds and then gives underprivileged kids rides to their athletic programs. So buys beer for them, pays for the fees, pays for the transportation, and there's a lot of talented athletes out there that they're just giving the hand up. They can actually go become Major League Baseball players, soccer players. And so that's what her charity's doing. So if you guys want to chat with her, she's available. You can help her. Looking ahead, we've talked about it. My priorities haven't changed. My messaging hasn't changed. I'm very consistent on everything I talked about. We're going to continue to fight for all things security. Again, thank you guys. I want to get into the Q&A. We're on all the social media platforms.
Also, what do you think about Waltz getting chosen to be vice
I
president?
don't know the guy. I never even heard of the guy's name. So, Liam did his job at the beginning and said, I can't talk about politics, so I won't talk about campaigns and active, political campaigns. Let me talk about the military, though, and we'll talk about policies as well tied to it. Right now, our troops, like I said, they start off making $12 an hour. Generations of Americans have been willing to serve our country for that little money, okay? The problem, we also have those that we have record low readiness levels, we have outdated technology, we have high operational tempo and lots of deployments. We're leaving our troops at overseas for too long, and in many cases for not the right reasons. And there's really not good leadership, okay? I am not a fan of Secretary of Defense Austin. I think what he has done to the military and the Pentagon, and frankly some of the service chiefs, including the Secretary of the Navy, have cost taxpayers billions of dollars, have left our troops uninspired and quitting, and we have record low recruitment and retention issues. So how do you fix it? One, you got to pay them better, you've got to lead them better, and you've got to invest in the military-industrial complex that supports them and gives our warfighters the unfair advantage they frankly deserve overseas and at home. And so you got to take care of their families, you got to give them the medical, health care, child care, on base. You got to let them come home once in a while so that they're not spending half of their money on alimony and child support like 40% of them do right now. A third of our troops qualify for food stamps right now. And so there's very self-evident problems and root cause reasons for what we're experiencing right now. And again, these are all direct results of policies coming out of the White House and policies coming out of the Pentagon. And this is why I'm fighting the pay raise side of this, and we need new leadership, in my opinion, as well. So, good question.
I'm really concerned about what's happening, not just in our communities, but in our nation as a whole. The erosion of family values, and there are a lot of ills affecting our children. I'm a retired law enforcement person. Thank you. And what's happening with law enforcement? Officers want to do their job, but their hands are tied because of erroneous policies. And I'm really concerned about what our children are being taught, indoctrinated actually, in our schools. What can we do as people who have a heart for patriotism and a love of this country? What can we do to restore that patriotism in our schools?
Yeah, two good questions. Different topics. I'll address the sheriff's thing real quick. We talked about some of this earlier. They deserve more pay. They deserve more help. They deserve more people working in the sheriff stations. They also deserve to be represented by elected officials who actually want to defend them and not defund them. Okay? And that is a very small percentage of people who actually supported the defund the police movement, but they were very vocal. And what happened is a lot of elected officials bent the knee to this thing out of fear, rather than staying true to the principles of supporting law enforcement. okay? I was not one of them. I'm probably one of the only ones in LA County that did not bend the knee to this defund the police thing. It's very dangerous. It affects every community, regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of party affiliation. It was a galactically stupid idea, and it had repercussions now that are irreparable for our local sheriffs. And now we, even in Santa Clarita, which is probably as close to utopia as you can get in the country, we have record high crime rates, petty theft and homelessness and drug abuse in the creeks and the washes, and our poor deputies are just trying to stay alive themselves. So there's elected officials trying to get rid of what's called qualified immunity, which means if a cop makes a mistake, if a cop makes a mistake, they need to be held accountable for it. And even our sheriff's deputies in here will say that. They'll be held accountable for it. But there are elected officials who are trying to make it so that the victim can go after their families even, right? And so why would you want to, then, if that's the case, if your life is on the line, your livelihood is on the line, and then the livelihood of your family is now at risk, there's no incentive to join the police departments right now. So this is the culture we've got to change. It starts at home, and this is a segue in your question about schools. We're blessed in Santa Clarita to have some of the best public schools. My son is a Quaker. My youngest son's at a public elementary school. And, we don't always agree with the teachers and what they believe in, and we have different issues. What I would like to see are public schools that don't get involved in politics, that don't get involved teach my kid how to read, write, and do arithmetic, and I'll teach him about the birds and bees when it's appropriate. And so, now, I don't like just blaming the schools because it's a function of the parents and it's a function of the grandparents, okay? I told my oldest kid, who's 18 now, he just graduated he'll be 18 soon, he just graduated from high school, and I'm comfortable with where he is because I put an armor of principles and values around him that I know that if he hears something that is inconsistent with what I think is right and what I believe in, whether it's love of country, service to country, love of law enforcement, veterans, belief in the Constitution, right versus wrong, good versus evil, that he's going to see the difference and be able to make that judgment call. So I am a little leery of blaming schools for things because I think it starts at home. And we as parents need to put that armor on our kids and teach them those values as well. I also, like I said, I'm very adamant that schools should do their jobs, teach our kids. And the fact that we are 41st or 43rd in the nation in terms of test scores is a pretty strong indicator that maybe we need to focus on academics more and not the other political stuff as much. And by the way, that's at all levels of school. And frankly, you talk to the teachers, and a lot of the teachers say the same thing. It's in many cases just the bureaucracy and the leadership in these school districts and in some of these schools themselves that are pushing stuff that frankly the teachers are afraid to push back against because they lose their jobs. Okay, so I'm a big supporter of the teachers. They don't make nearly enough money to do what they do. God knows I wouldn't be able to do it. I've got one 7-year-old. I can't imagine having 30. But it starts at home, and we've got to support. We've got to get more people to want to teach and not just to push social or political agendas in the classroom. So we have a lot in Santa Clarita, so I'm very proud of it.
Thank you, Congressman, for letting me speak. I never get chosen for raffles, and
yeah, it's a big win, yeah. Sorry.
Except for there were some rules at the beginning that I'm going to respect, so I highly modified my question to respect the regulations, and basically they're a result of my lack of knowledge of how politics work. With that said, I'm just a citizen that's very concerned for the future of our communities, especially our children.
Yeah.
I'll refer to the state law, which you did as well, even though you're a federal representative, because I believe as a member of the community, you have an interest in state laws that impact our children. This said AB 1955, now signed into law on July 15th by Newsom, has removed a parent's ability to make choices for their children as they relate to gender identity. School administrators are prohibited from notifying parents of a child's desire to change their gender. Basically, the school will take charge of our children's gender, and this is scary. when schools have used DEI to pack leadership positions with LGBT and other activists. Now, this said, and respecting the rules of the forum, I would just like to ask you, how can I speak to you about some things that are discussed in a different forum?
I'm sorry, repeat the question. I'm sorry.
How can I?
Not the whole thing, just the last part.
Yeah. How can I speak to you about things that are not appropriate in this forum?
Well, we can speak offline. I have, the other half of my life is political, but this is a policy question. So I'm comfortable talking about it. It's a wrong policy, and sometimes what happens, especially in Sacramento, where there's it's a 70-30 split. By the way, like I said, there's nothing wrong with bipartisanship. I also don't think there's something wrong with balanced government. I think every district should be a swing district. There's only like 8 districts that are actually competitive. By the way, ours is obviously one of them, because you haven't watched TV in the last 5 years. But I think they should intentionally make every district plus or minus 2% party registration, so it's even, so that we actually do get better candidates, we get stronger, more informed candidates, harder working candidates, people who are willing to compromise and negotiate to get to a settlement. And the problem with Sacramento, and the product of this problem in Sacramento, are things like AB 1955, where there is no check to one party. And this isn't just a Democrat versus Republican, it's Republicans versus Democrats as well. There needs to be checks and balances in government. And our state literally has no checks and balances, starting at the governor's level, starting at the legislative level, down to the county level. And now we've got guys like Gascon who are effectively codifying a lot of this pro-criminal, security type stuff. And so you end up with these policies. They have second and third order repercussions. And like I said, I have the same power when it comes to California laws that you do, meaning I can vote for them or against them. And I'm very frustrated sometimes by the outcome. But my job is to prevent that happening at the federal level. For every bill like this one in Sacramento, there's an ugly twin sister in Washington, D.C., okay? And my job is to make sure that that twin does not get allowed to be signed into law, and that California doesn't become effectively the norm throughout the entire country. Because we can't afford it. We can't afford it for a lot of reasons. It's not just the social issues, it's the economic issues, national security issues. So pay attention to who you're voting for. If someone intentionally is putting you in harm's way as an elected official, right? If they're intentionally eroding your security, they're either not paying attention and they don't understand the issue, or they're doing it with malevolent intent. And I think it's important for all of us, when these things pass, to go back and look at the originator and understand, do they just not understand what they just did, or did they do something on purpose that puts us in harm's way? And if that's the case, they should not be an elected official representing us, who should be looking after us. So that's my problem with the bill. That at a macro level, the federal level, is the border issue as well, in my opinion, on that one. So, yes, sir.
Hi, Mike. I live in Castaic, and there are 86,000 people who live in the small city of Castaic.
Yeah.
One main road, Hillcrest, that goes to the top, and then we've got the old road at the bottom that parallels Interstate 5. They are making the old road wider, but it's taking a lot of time, and there's a lot of traffic going up and down, especially from when people go to work and back from work, and it's a dangerous road. I was wondering if there's any way that you could speed up that construction.
Yeah, So there are things we're doing. We are trying to help that old road. There's a construction area on the old road near Magic Mountain right now, which was very dangerous. It's technically not in Castaic, it's in Santa Clarita, but it's the feeder into the old road into Castaic. We have been working with the county to help with the funding on that and the expediting that project. The other problems that you cited are also potentially either federal grant money that we are chasing, either with or without the support of the county, and also looking at earmarks. And we need the town of Castaic for an earmark to submit those types of projects to us for earmarks. We can't originate them. So that's a good thing to talk to your town council about as far as earmark transportation infrastructure, road construction. We can help with those types of things. They have that one roundabout. You want to see American heads explode? Put them in a roundabout. And out there. It's actually very efficient. But yes, there's more money that we're chasing. Yes, I recognize it's a security hazard, especially with fires or earthquakes, or God forbid something happens at the lake. We need ingress and egress besides just the 2-lane highway right there. We're working with the county, but it is, the bulk of that funding is coming either from the state or from the county, and then the local cities as well. But we'll be a force multiplier for it.
Well, Mike, we all believe you can do anything, so we'll be patient.
We need more of those roundabouts. Hey, stranger.
Hi, Mike. First of all, I want to thank you for everything you've been doing to try to help us with the problems at the Chiquita Canyon landfill. And I know it's been wrong. Okay, but the question I have for you is that one of the biggest problems that we're having with our budgets as a household is with these insurance companies.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you can do to, I know it's, you mostly deal with federal stuff, but
yeah,
this is out of control
it's
all
out of
over the country.
Yeah, this is.
I'd just like to know what you can do to help with these insurance companies. I mean, it's a point of being, we all feel helpless with these people, trying to deal with these people.
So you guys are all seeing it, and if you haven't looked at, if you're like one of these auto pay people like I was for a couple of years and I didn't look at my insurance bill, I looked at it a couple months ago and holy cow, it's not the same as it was 2 years ago. And I am a current homeowner with USAA, a customer of them for 25, 30 years almost, and I am seeing a spike. The other challenge is that if you are a new homeowner or aspiring to be a new homeowner, you can't actually get insurance in some of these neighborhoods right now. The other challenge is if you're a homeowner who's trying to sell your house, you can't find a buyer who qualifies to buy your home because the pre-qualification for debt-to-income ratios and loan-to-value ratios that the loan underwriters use is now not being driven by the loan of the mortgage or the property taxes, but the insurance costs. So a $3,000 mortgage may actually have an additional, $800 a month in some cases fire insurance premium that is overlaid per month on top of that, and that alone makes it so that they don't qualify for the loan. I want to be very careful because I messaged incorrectly on this, and I've learned a lot about this issue over the last year. This isn't State Farm trying to screw us, okay? This is State Farm as a company that is in the business of providing insurance, but also required to also make money, trying to operate in a state where the governor himself has said, thou shalt not increase your rates, okay? And when you do price control like that, whether it's rent control or for any other product, and you say, thou shalt not charge more than X, it has this short-term high. It's like a margarita party, right? We all love margarita until the next day, and we get the hangover effect. And what happens is we all benefit from that, hey, my rates didn't go up this year, but guess what? Because my rates didn't go up, and because now State Farm and these other insurance companies aren't able to actually have a business case to continue to operate in California. By the way, this isn't Newsom saying, hey, I want to make sure your profit margins are below it. It's predatory behavior when you look at the restrictions he's putting on these companies, and they decide to leave the state. Okay, just like Elon just decided to move SpaceX, a couple other facilities, Tesla. There's a reason these companies are leaving. It's oppressive policies that, from a corporation's perspective, make it cost prohibitive to continue to underwrite these insurance policies. So you can go back to Hammurabi's code, thousands of years ago, where every government that implemented price control policies, by the way, that's called socialism in its end state, ends up falling apart. And California is on the verge of effectively, from a price control perspective, becoming a full-on socialist state because of these policies. Same thing with rent control. Sounds great on paper, but the second and third order consequences is now landlords don't want to buy investment properties to rent out because they end up losing money on the deal. Now there's not rental properties out there in one of the least affordable environments that our country's ever seen, and people can't, find rental properties to live in because the investors are leaving. So how do you fix it? One, you appeal to the governor. We have actually introduced bills or letters that have several members of Congress appealing to the governor to reconsider this policy, stop the oppressive, remember the 4 C's, capitalism in competition? Let capitalism actually work, let competition come in. More insurance companies will realize this is a great market. Why would you not want to compete in California? Well, the reason is the governor. Okay, but you get the governor out of the way, you get the bureaucracy and the red tape and the restrictions out of the way, you'll have more competition, you'll have more, opportunities to get cost out. You watch TV, every commercial break, there's a Geico commercial, there's a Progressive commercial, there's there's 500 car insurance companies. We're not seeing that spike in car insurance premiums, right? It's because there's a lot of competition. It's going up. It's following that red line. But it's not like property values where it's backbreaking and you can't afford to drive a car anymore. But it's because there's more competition. So the bottom line is Newsom has screwed up this issue, many others as well, and we've got to keep that in mind. It's a policy problem. It's a lack of, again, check and balance. There's entities looking out for certain groups and not the other 78% of us. So
I just recently read an article where Warren Buffett, the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, he just said that on his investments in insurance companies, he this last year, 2023, he experienced 185% increase return on his money.
yeah.
So it's more than just the.
Well, and I'm not defending anyone, right? This is a way that can happen is if you have, say you have 50 states that you're servicing, and your profit margins in one state are negative 20 because of the regulation and the price caps that have been artificially placed on there because of Governor X or Y, multiple states, and then you decide not to do business in those states all of a sudden, your company's profit margins will increase. And that's what the governor doesn't understand is that the leadership at State Farm or whatever, I'm not picking this, I just don't know all of insurance companies. All of these insurance companies, we're down to basically the FAIR Plan, which is a government subsidized insurance plan that is the only thing left that people can actually get. And by the way, it's not a real insurance plan. It's just a bogus sort of socialist welfare program as a backstop for extremist things. But good luck trying to collect on that if your house burns to the ground, the FAIR Plan probably isn't going to cover it. So yes, what happens is you see a spike in profitability because you have companies that have decided to abandon states where they were basically losing their assets, right? It's assets. So, that they've become now more profitable as a result of that. But I'm not defending any of these companies. I'm just explaining the companies that they literally are chartered to make money to their shareholders to provide a service. And when they get put into a marketplace where they're not allowed to provide a service, when they're not allowed to make money, they will leave that market space. That is the natural evolution of businesses, and it's, like I said, Hammurabi's code for 2,000 years has taught us that lesson, and it's the downfall of civilizations in many cases. So, good question. It's something we're going to keep fighting and campaigning for. We should incentivize instead of doing that.
I'm Diane, and I'm just going to bring up something where I just need to talk, and maybe you just need to look into it for me and then get back to everybody.
Okay.
It's the election. First of all, I don't care whether you're Democrat, Republican, skyscraper, whatever you are, vote. Do not, if any of you sit home and you don't vote for one reason or another, because you're babies, because you think you can't do anything, you should be ashamed of yourselves and you have no right to complain about anything. So if you don't vote, don't complain. Now, the worst thing that we could do is to allow these machines to have anything to do with our voting. And on top of that, you say, oh, we have to accept them, it's governor, we got to do it, the federal government, the governor here, everything. No, that's not true. Your county sheriff and your board of supervisors have the power to investigate. The sheriff has the power to investigate the election, the past election, just not even 2020, go to 2022. If he sees any shadow of cheating, and it is well proven and documented that there was tremendous amount of cheating. The algorithms in those machines are controlled. They have the power to go against our governor and eliminate the machines, not to mention how they're ever going to afford the cost of the machines in the first place for 2024. It is like averages out to like $19.50 a ballot versus $1.85 in-person voting, paper ballots, legal citizen, all the other stuff you know I'm thinking because I'm this. What I want to know is if you don't know how to go about getting the county supervisors and the sheriff to do this, Riverside County, Chad Bianco, they are well on their way. There's all kinds of counties all through California that are with New California State, which is what I'm with. And they are actually getting away from the machines. They are refusing to use them, and the governor and his little people.
So let me address that. Good. I appreciate your perspective, and I know where you are on this. First of all, I agree. Everyone should vote. Okay, we had very low voter turnout in the last couple of elections. Let me talk about what California's policies are on elections, because I referenced it, and we have passed legislation that prevents the codification of California election laws at the federal level. California, first of all, we talked about it, doesn't require voter ID. They allow for same-day registration without voter ID. They do not sanitize their registration rolls, meaning if there's 20 million eligible voters, the reality is because they haven't actually gone through and cleansed the registration rolls, people go to college, people move, a lot of people have moved away, a lot of people have moved in. You probably at your house still get ballots from the previous homeowners. I love my postal workers. I love our post offices. I love our, many of them are veterans. I love the mail delivery people. But I still get bills from, or packages that were meant to go to houses that aren't mine. So, someone having a medical emergency, or are you good? Okay. Oh, you're good. I'm sorry. All right. You're all right. And so the fact is that if you're going to do universal vote by mail, which I have voted through the mail, you have the option in California to track it. You got to make sure that your ballot is tracked. But the state needs to make sure that dead people aren't getting ballots, that people who have moved are not getting ballots sent to their old houses, and the people that have moved here are actually getting the ballots that they deserve, right? So that doesn't happen right now, and that's a weakness. This was HR 1 in the last Congress under the other majority. They wanted to basically adopt and codify California election laws for the entire country, which is universal vote by mail, same-day registration, no voter ID. And some states and some areas are actually allowing illegal immigrants who are not citizens of the United States to vote, to include in Washington, D.C., and that is flagrantly wrong. So there's a lot of opportunity to reform, and again, this should be nonpartisan, like you said, Diane, and she outlined some of the people you can reach out to. The Secretary of State of California controls the sort of way elections are conducted in California, but the state legislative body for the Constitution determines the time, manner, and location of the election. So, good question. Okay.
Good evening, Congressman. My name is Fatin Sacco, and my family and I have been living in Santa Clarita for about 20 years. I have a comment and a question, both unrelated, okay? So the comment is, so my kids, 2 of them have graduated from Academy of the Canyons here on the COC campus. And currently 1 more here is at AOC, and we just really.
By the way, that's Academy of the Canyons. Sorry.
And so we just really need your help to advocate for us for the school. Yeah. There's some funding that's going to just remain for 2 years for the school, and they're going to take it away. It's going to dry up. It's for the middle college grant funding. And they're going to pull it away from the budgets for the schools, and so we just really need your help to support and advocate for that, so that it stays at the school level and that it's not divided up by the general school, so that it stays at the middle college, high school. So it's just a request.
And good request. So the sum of the parts of funding for College of the Canyons comes from federal, state, local, as well as county money. We've gotten $6 to $8 million for College of the Canyon. I'm going to be sitting down with COC leadership here in the next couple of weeks while we're in recess. There's a lot of change happening here at COC, I'll put it that way, and with that requires communication and collaboration at levels that we didn't have before. Okay, so I wasn't aware that AOC was starting to get defunded at the levels that it was. It made me an opportunity where we can get an earmark and hopefully keep that program going. That for those that don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is for senior high school students to basically attend COC as college level students, receive college credits at a very discounted rate and set them up for future educational benefits for some high potential folks.
Thank you so much. And my question is, so we live in a gated community close by, and crime has just been rampant, theft. And we're just being targeted by gangs such as the Chilean gangs. I'm sure you've heard about it. And we've had quite a few robberies and burglaries in our neighborhood. Sometimes when we call the sheriffs, they either, too busy to defunding, they can't come out, or basically when they do arrest somebody, they're just released the very next day.
Yep.
So we just it's frustrating. We really need some of these problems resolved in our community. It's, we're scared to sleep at night. We're adding alarm systems. We're adding so many things, and have the children, and sometimes they're going
It goes to the neighborhood security,
So what can
we
we do to
So,
help us?
So let's go to root cause, right? So I'm a big fan of the policies, right? There's people and then there's the policies, and in the end, especially this crime issue is a product of the people who have put these policies in place. What happened was about 10 to 15 years ago, there was a proposition on the ballot in California that would have allowed us to build more prisons. Okay. At the time, our population, this is probably more than that, it's probably 20, 25 years ago now. At the time, our population was roughly 30 million, just shy of 30 million people in the state. We are now around 40 million. It's going down every day. But that proposition was basically rejected by the people. And the argument that some folks made was that we didn't want to become a prison state. Well, we weren't becoming a prison state. We were just increasing prison capacity to accommodate for the fact that our state was growing. And when you have a growing population, you're going to have a growing population of crime and criminals, and you need a place to put them. They're called prisons or jails, right? So the state and our voters, frankly, many of us, not me, voted to not fund more prisons. Now you're left in a position where the growth of population happens. You're at 40 some odd million. A lot of these prisons were not up to code in terms of earthquake requirements, and they are taken offline. They defund the prisons. And so now the number of criminals doesn't go down because criminals don't work that way. They don't go, oh, sorry, I'm not supposed to be a criminal today because you don't have capacity in prison. They actually accelerate their crimes, and there's more criminals. So what happens then is the state decides to put Prop 47 on the ballot, which says, rather than putting more people in jails, let's change the definition of the felon, right? Or the felony or the misdemeanor. Now, something that used to be a felony, which would have 5 to 10 years in prison, is now considered a misdemeanor, which is usually probation, slap on the wrist, and what used to be a misdemeanor is now a slap on the wrist, and the judge doesn't even, in some cases, bring you in front of the courts, right? So that happens. Then Prop 57, and by the way, if it's called Prop, that means that you all voted for it or against it, but it passed. Prop 57 says we're going to allow for early release of felons because our prisons are overcrowded. So despite that we've changed the definition of a felony, we still have too many prisoners and not enough prisons, and we have now allowed for early release of felons. Then our legislators in Sacramento come out with this thing called AB 109, which says if you commit a felony and you would normally go to prison, we're going to allow you to serve your time in a local jail. So now the jail that used to be across from Toppers, and is now on Center Point, this lovely new sheriff's station, is now overcrowded because of AB 109, where you've got felons and high. By the way, when they call it a misdemeanor, you should look at the list of things that they call a misdemeanor. It's actually very violent crimes in many cases. There's cases of rape, there's cases of assault that are considered misdemeanors, which are literally they're literally released that day. Okay, then you overlay cashless bail, where you've got elected officials and DAs like Gaston saying, hey, I'm not going to charge you anything to get out of prison for free until your court date, right? That happened, that's real, that's still, in many cases, the law of the land in some of these counties. And then you've got the defund the police movement, so you don't have enough cops, around, because they're literally getting fired and going not hired, or they're not staffing up the academies. And the probably the nastiest side effect, besides the crime and besides what's happening to our cops, is within Prop 47, AB 109, and 57, there's now language that prevents judges from requiring someone who's picked up for, say, shooting up heroin in the streets. They'd be brought in front of a judge by the deputy. The judge would say, hey, we're going to commute your sentence. You don't have to do any jail time, but you have to go to the drug rehab facility. You've got to complete this 60-day, 90-day program. You've got to meet these wickets, and you can't be released until you do that. And oh, by the way, if you have a mental health problem, you're required to go to a mental health facility and get that same kind of treatment. You're not allowed to leave until you complete that, because we want you to get clean. We want you to get the mental health services that you deserve, and we don't want you in the creek shooting up, heroin, right? Those bills, those laws now prevent the judges from actually doing that. So now, if you're deputy, XYZ, you know that if I bring this guy in and he's got a mental health problem and a drug problem, he's shooting up heroin, and he's acting, inappropriately in public, I can arrest him and I'll bring him in, but he's going to be released, right? So they don't do that anymore because there's not enough sheriff's deputies to do that. It's gotten to the point now where they also, if someone has their house broken into and $500, $1,000, $1,500 worth of stuff is stolen, they also know that that criminal's not going to necessarily get charged and they're going to be released. It is so bad in our county right now because of the policies of Gaston that you can literally kill someone and not be charged, or be let out on bail almost the next day and then be charged with a lower level misdemeanor. There are murderers who have gotten out within just a couple of years. There are people who have killed kids in the Antelope Valley who were released just a few years after they intentionally murdered children because of DA Gaston. So the combination of all of these things is why we are seeing. We are incentivizing criminals to commit crimes rather than holding them accountable, holding them in prison, and making our safe street. Let's invest in the people that provide the security blankets to us rather than investing in criminals. Amen. Right? And the county right now is in the wrong business. They're in the business of investing in criminals. Gaston is like the Penguin of Gotham City right now instead of the district attorney for Los Angeles County. So I don't know how to fix that.
Hi, Congressman. I'm a first-time voter this election. I turned 18 after the primary this year for California, and I wrote down my question, but something in your slideshow kind of threw me off script, so I hope I can get through it. Congressman, as you should know, the Violence Against Women Act was established in 1994. It was a bipartisan act, and it comes up to Congress every 5 years for renewal. You talked about co-sponsoring a Violence Against Women Act in your slideshow. This 1994 Act protects survivors of domestic abuse, sexual assault, and stalking, as well as providing support for children who are victims of sexual abuse and child molestation. When the Act came up for renewal in 2021, it was brought up by Representative Jackson of Texas. You voted against renewing the Act. Is this the same Act you talk about co-sponsoring in your slideshow? Is it the same Act? And, yeah, sorry.
So the Act that I ended up co-sponsoring was effectively what you cited as the original version of it. The problem with the bill that was introduced in 2021, I believe you said it was, I'll take the word for it, it was a couple of years ago, I voted again, 2021 or 2022?
March 17th, 2021.
2021. So the problem, I love you, you know your facts, I love that. The problem with that particular bill was that it had language in there that actually ended up unintentionally depriving other people of their constitutional rights as a result of the protection of women who have been the victims of violence, okay? So, and I was very clear about this. And when you read the bills, the differences between that one, that ended up going nowhere, by the way, okay? And I want to be very clear. The 2021 version was introduced while the Democrats the opposition party was in control of the House, Senate, and in the White House, and that was not signed into law because of some of the constitutional collisions that were embedded in that. And one of my rules of thumb, we talk about why I vote a certain way. The Constitution is one of the 4 C's. When you are given a right, a privilege, or a constitutional opportunity or responsibility or right, it cannot come at the expense of another American. Okay, and that's a good litmus test for me for all pieces of legislation. If I'm trying to protect someone from something, it can't come at the expense of another demographic. Okay, and there were parts of that bill that, while we were trying to do the right thing and protect, and I was trying to get to yes on that original, or on that second version, there was literally language in there that deprived other Americans, and that may not have had anything to do with the actual violence, domestic violence case against women. It was depriving them of their constitutional rights. Now, the good thing is that we communicated the problem that we had with the bill, and there were a lot of us that had a problem with that version of the bill, and we did get it rewritten such that it was replicating effectively the original VAWA, and that's what I was a co-sponsor of. That got signed into law, and that version actually did get signed into law under Pelosi, Schumer, and Biden, and so that is the one that I supported in the end, and was the sort of, I'd say, the pure version of what VAWA was meant to be in the early days, and what it aspires to be in terms of intent of protecting women against domestic violence. So it is a good thing. This has been miscommunicated by some folks that don't like me, and they try to spin it a certain way. It's why we talk about it at every town hall, because I'm very proud of it. It's a way to protect someone without doing it at the expense of someone else. That's very hard to do at the federal level in some cases, but it's a very important piece of legislation. So we sponsored the version that is now the law of the land, signed by President Biden.
Hello, Congressman. My name is Robert Ryan. I'd love to get into a lot of the fun stuff about firearm ownership in California, but we'll go back to education. So you covered a lot of different things, but I would like to see in our schools actually go back to teaching civics and government, so people can actually understand.
Wouldn't that be enough?
It's a novel idea, but I would love to see it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, our school should teach civics. No one really balances their checkbook anymore, but you should still teach the fundamentals of how to manage your money, life skills that we used to have home ec, we used to have civics classes, and none of those are really taught in school. And in many cases, history isn't being taught. And we should teach our kids our nation's history, good, bad, and ugly, right? If you need a statue to remind you about the history of our country, then we're doing it wrong. We need to teach our kids what happened during the Civil War so that we can avoid things like that in the future. Talk about why we as a nation aren't perfect, and we started literally with the words in pursuit of a more perfect union. It's a recognition that we were flawed not only as human beings but as a country, and in the arc of 248 years we have pursued that more perfect union, right? You got to teach that. The schools need to teach that. The civics, everything that went right, everything that went wrong. And when you do that, what you figure out is that, especially if you're learning about world history in other countries and what's going on even today in other nations, you realize just how special this experiment called the United States of America is compared to literally every other country in the history of this planet. There is nothing as glorious as this country. There is no country in the history of this world. This is why I say we as parents need to do this for our kids, because it's not being taught in schools. It's not being taught unabashedly. We should be cognizant of our warts and our history, and the fact that women weren't allowed to vote until the 20th century in this country, right? 1919, women weren't allowed to vote. The fact that we had slaves in this country, these are appalling things that should have been part of the base text of the Constitution that says, thou shalt allow all races and all genders the opportunities, regardless of color, gender, creed, the right to vote, the right to freedom, right? And there were exceptions to that. And we recognize that, our founding fathers recognized that, and they punted on some of these things. But even with those thwarts, and even with those challenges, and we had a civil war where we literally killed ourselves to the tune of 400,000 people, close to 1 million people total wounded, to resolve these issues. It is still the best country in the world, and we need to teach our kids to take pride in our country, to want to serve her, because if we don't serve her, then she becomes the country that we look down at right now and feel sorry for, and don't have the opportunities that we have here as Americans. And so I got off on a tangent. The bottom line is we need to teach our kids civics in high school, and that should be part of junior high.
Hello, Congressman. I'm Garcia. I'm Miguel Cruz. I'm an ex-Army veteran too. So, actually, I mean, the first thing I want to say is thank you to your office, guys. Last minute, Mrs. Emma Jensen got us into the Capitol building. We went to Washington D.C.
Oh, cool! Yeah.
We did this insane run of the whole East Coast in like 12 days, all the way from Virginia to Vermont and Maine and down. So it was insane, but we did it so our kids can see the history of the country. Speaking about the Civil War, we went to Gettysburg, and most people don't know California. We had the California 100 that fought in the Civil War and stuff, so it's pretty cool. But so I just want to say thank you for that. I want to also say thank you for the impression that you did on my son. My son's in high school right now. He met you at Golden Valley. Talks really highly about you, says he wants to be a politician. So.
Oh, no. My God, he wants to be a naval aviator. Tell him.
Yeah, he says Air Force
aviator.
Yeah. My daughter wants to be a police officer. My son wants, my middle one wants to work in aerospace. So all my kids have stripes in what it is to be an American.
Sounds right. Thank you.
Yeah. They're up there. Actually, they wanted to meet you, so they came here. So nice. But the question that I come with actually does kind of go, me being a middle school educator, one thing I've noticed is this increase in kids being recruited at younger levels into gangs. Been living in Santa Clarita since I got out of the military. Back in 2009, we've been living in Santa Clarita, and we moved here, when I left Killeen, Texas, we moved over here to be in a safe town. Yeah. We heard Santa Clarita was one of the safest towns in LA County, so we were excited about it. My wife grew up in Silmar, so she always spoke highly about Santa Clarita being safe and being very family-oriented. Being here since 2009, we've noticed this increase, as we've been saying it all day, or all evening, violence and stuff. But now I'm noticing this increase in, essentially, I don't want to say gang activity, but recruitment.
Yeah.
I've called the city hall numerous times where they would tag on the street. I would call and remove the tag because that was the point where they would tag so they know to recruit right there. My question is there any policies or anything that's going on to kind of diffuse this?
Yeah, we kind of already talked about all of the sort of root cause for the crime spikes. One of the things that when the sheriff's department is told by the county supervisor, your budget is X, right? And oh, by the way, that's 80% of what it was last year. It's, it's 60% of what it was 4 years ago. The sheriff's department, the county sheriff, and then the station sheriffs, they have to make decisions that they don't want to have to make, but they have to. It's not like they have extra money. And this is where our earmarks come and help them. But we bolt on $3 million to, the Santa Clarita Sheriffs. We bolted on $2 million to the Antelope Valley Sheriffs. But it's still not enough to keep them whole. So some of the decisions that they're forced to make, even though they don't want to, is to get rid of what are called the task force, right? And the deputies in here can talk to it better than I can, but there's a gang task force. There's a rape victim task force where they literally go to the victim and do the rape kit testing right then and there so that any evidence can be preserved. They have the youth outreach programs like what's in Valverde, where that got put on hold for a couple of years, I think, close to a couple of years, because they literally didn't have the money to pay for these task force, right? And on the I-5 corridor, you've got the mainstream of basically narcotics trading, and human smuggling right now is at an all-time record high. And this I-5 corridor and then the 14 going to the high desert are literally the main arteries, like of human smuggling. And the sheriffs used to be able to do busts. They used to be able to track cars coming across the border with drugs and humans. And then by the time they got to our either county or our city, you'd see this major operation happen on the 5. They pull it over, and there'd be 500 pounds of cocaine in the trunk of 2 humans being smuggled. That task force doesn't exist anymore at the levels it did because of the budget cut. So it goes back to the question of how do we fix it. It's a whole of government approach. It's a reinstilling values in all of us to appreciate what the cops do, not make them the bad guys. But it's a funding level. Call the supervisors. Okay? Be aggressive with the supervisors verbally and let them know that defunding the police was the dumbest thing that any civics, elected official has done, at least in the history of this country, in my opinion, recently, and the damage is irreparable right now, and so you can't just spend the amount of money that you defunded at this point. You almost have to double that in order to just attract talent. And oh, by the way, the policies and everything that's also crushing our cops need to be changed as well, so they feel like they want to do the job and not just feel like they're being prosecuted all the time.
I have one more quick question. One thing that we learned that we saw when we were at the East Coast was living history. For those that are aware of it, they actually had people that reenact, like the Civil War reenactments from history. Is there any way that we can bring that to the West Coast also? Northern California, Sonoma.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. We can take that offline. I would strongly encourage. I know not everyone can do it, but you can watch YouTube videos now that you can. They live stream like reenactments of Gettysburg. So if you can't physically get there, I think part of what's special about those reenactments is that it's actually done on Little Round Top, right? So you see Colonel Chamberlain from the 2nd Regiment of Maine defending Little Round Top as the Confederate Army was rushing up that terrain. That can't be replicated in California, in my opinion. That can be seen, though, now live stream, and you can see the videos of it. So I think the value of what you're describing is very important, but I don't know about replicating those.
In reference to, like in Sonoma, that's Sonoma County, the city of Sonoma, that's where California became California.
Oh, yeah.
When our...
Oh, yeah, there's probably opportunity to do that. Yeah,
so
let's take it offline, and there's a lot of history that we can probably recreate. All right. Anything left on that? Call on this side?
Gary, you got to
All right. Go ahead, Gary. And yes, if we can get, I'm trying to be respectful of everyone's time. We still have half the audience here, so I don't want to quit, but I do want to, and this doesn't have to be all positive feedback. It's love fest here. We can ask the hard questions. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm sure we were all updated on what we've been doing recently, so thank you. I was just thinking, while you were presenting the part about illegal immigrants to the U.S., I know it's a big problem right now. You explicitly mentioned one country, which is China. Mm-hmm. I'm not Chinese, I'm Korean, but I feel like I should speak on this. And I think when I just looked up the percentage, and it's 15% of the illegal immigrants coming are Asian, so that must mean that less than 15% are Chinese. I think it's good to say what the facts are.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that if Chinese immigrants are the problem, then I would really appreciate it if you take more care in the future speeches and presentations you do to separate the problems of the country and what their government leaders are doing.
Yeah.
And then separate it from the people, because there's a lot of Chinese Americans living here too.
Yep.
And I remember when the COVID-19 pandemic happened, there was
a
spike in
I completely understand it. And what that chart, I believe, said was illegal immigrants from China. And this is not meant to be critical of the Chinese people. This is not meant to be critical of legal immigrants that come here. And by the way, we have a lot of fantastic Americans here who have come from China. We should encourage that. We need workforce. We need intelligent and value-added immigrants to come to this country. What I am very critical of, though, is the open border. And the stat up there wasn't meant to say the plurality or even the majority of people coming across the border are coming from China. The point of that chart is that just in the last year, we've seen a 2,000% increase of illegal immigrants coming across the border from China that are in most cases actually being funded by the CCP government. So this isn't an anti-people of China issue. This isn't me being critical of Chinese immigrants by any stretch of the imagination. But the CCP government itself, it's a very small group of people that control literally a billion people, billions of people, is a corrupt communist government. And they are doing things nefariously against their neighbors. They steal roughly $400 billion of intellectual property from the United States. They have breached some of our security systems at the federal level, at the state level, at the local levels. They are sending more spies to this country. I can't talk about the classified information, but at higher rates than any other country in the world. They are committing a genocide against the Uyghurs that's not getting any publicity. And when I say they, I'm talking about the CCP government. Literally killing hundreds of thousands of people because of the religious affiliation. That is genocide, okay? They have record high encroachments against the country of Taiwan. They have aspirations of going to war against Taiwan with their CCP Plan 2050, which is effectively executing an invasion and annexing of Taiwan by 2027. They have some of the most egregious human rights violations, and they are willing to effectively do whatever it takes to rob, replicate, and replace every American industry, whether it's something that builds, someone who builds toilet paper holders to someone that builds F-35s. It's amazing when you look at their military hardware how closely it resembles ours. So yes, I agree with you. We need to be very sensitive. And Grace Meng, who's a Democrat in Congress, has been very adamant about this. This is not against the people of China. Okay, the criticism isn't against the people of China or Chinese immigrants who come here legally. But when you come to this country illegally, you need to be held accountable. And we need to be eyes wide open that a country that we used to call a near-peer threat just 5 years ago, peer threat 5 years ago, we now call a peer threat. And I have seen I have every clearance in the world. I have seen more classified data. It's like the opposite of a therapy session. I go into these meetings and in a great mood and I walk out depressed because I see what China, the CCP, has done in almost every domain, in space, on the surface, underwater, cybersecurity, offensive and defensive, espionage, you name it, intellectual property theft on the commercial as well as on the DoD side. They are robbing us. They are literally trying to not just compete with us, but they are trying to eliminate us. So we need to take this now peer threat that, by the way, has the largest arsenal of nuclear weapons and will not sign up to any sort of nuclear armistice or SALT, state strategic arm limitation or strategic arm reduction treaty. They won't sign it. They're also the biggest polluter on the planet. You want to talk about CO2 emissions and climate change and whatnot. They are emitting roughly 10 times what the top 3 countries are emitting and polluting. They are getting worse. They didn't sign the climate accords, but they were asked to basically have a plan to start, at least leveling off. This is the problem with the CCP right now and the communist regime in China. Not the Chinese people, but yes, if you come here illegally, I don't care what your country of origin is, but it's very important that when we recognize a trend like a 2,000% increase in illegal immigrants coming, this isn't legal immigrants, right? Love them. We need more of them. Legal? Good. Need more of them. Illegal? Don't need any of them. We should not have any of it. And when you see a 2,000% spike in the country, when you see a 2,000% spike from a country which is literally an existential threat to our country, you have to pay attention to it. But I am sensitive to what you're saying. I appreciate that, and I know you're not Chinese, but
I'm not trying to deny any of the things that they're doing to the U.S. and the U.S. know the most in this room. So I'm not denying any of that. I'm just saying that when you're presenting to other people as a person in leadership, this can raise bias and a little bit of racism towards Chinese people.
I disagree with that.
I'm saying it might, and that's why COVID-19 happened and Chinese Americans were hurt by it, even though no one is saying attack them outright. So I'm just saying, if you could just take a little bit extra care in the future, I'd really appreciate it. That's all.
Yeah, and I want to be, so let's take that point, and this applies to everyone equally, right? I agree with that. I agree that we should not attribute the illegal immigration to any particular demographic and put them at risk. And some people, unfortunately, do act on that. That is true for cops. That's true for military. That's true for African Americans, it's true for white people. If people use irresponsible rhetoric and assign it to a demographic and then push to have that demographic attacked because of it, that is irresponsible. That's not what I'm doing. I didn't do that, I didn't say that. I think individuals need to be held accountable. When you commit a crime, you need to be held accountable. But it is very important for us to recognize that our peer threat, whether it's Russia or China, when you see that sort of activity, that's a trend, that's a national security issue. But I understand your point, but we also as citizens need to be responsible in how we interpret information and not...
Before the Constitution was passed, there had to be 10 amendments to that, the Bill of Rights.
Right.
The 25th Amendment, I think, has not been really addressed in the last 3 years. And my idea is I think we need to have another amendment. We have the age requirement for the presidency. I think we need one for the top part of that age group. And 5 years before that age is reached, there should be a Constitution amendment that says cognitive tests and MRIs are required so that our country doesn't have to go through this again. What do you think?
So the 25th Amendment basically says that at some point the cabinet of the executive branch has the authority to effectively begin a process to remove a president if that president is deemed basically incapacitated, incapable, or deficient in any case. I'm not going to make you know where I stand on this administration. I think this is one of the worst administrations, and I don't mean that as an attack on Joe Biden. Let's talk about let's keep it anchored around policies, right? We've got an open border, we've got record high inflation, we've got record high reckless spending, we haven't cut taxes with Afghanistan. Most people have forgotten about the debacle of Afghanistan just a few years ago where 13 Americans lost their lives. Hundreds of Afghans have lost their lives. The abuse of women in Afghanistan right now under the Taliban rule is completely not in the news. We have soft on crime policies at the national level. We have sort of squishy mentality when it comes to supporting our partners in Israel. We had a president who basically said Afghanistan was a logistical success, despite what we all saw happen on the news with literally human beings falling off of cargo planes and Americans dying. He said when it came to the Russians building their troops along the Ukraine border, he said, it depends on, he was asked, what are you going to do about it? He said, well, it depends on if it's a slight encroachment or what level of encroachment, which was effectively, in the wake of Afghanistan, a green light for Putin to invade Ukraine. And that's why we ended up where we were there. We have a record, we talked about the fentanyl crisis as a result. We have Taiwan in the lurch now because we have not been proactive enough in pivoting to the Pacific and arming ourselves against the CCP at the military levels that we should be. We've got the record low recruitment and retention that we talked about in the military. The issue with our veterans that some of our veterans are talking about now, we're not standing up to the CCP. We have record high energy prices because we closed our own pipelines down and funded Russian pipelines, and now we are buying oil from a country that we are technically providing weapons and money to an adversary that they're at war with, that being Russia, that we are buying oil from while they fight Ukraine with our money and our weapons. And we've got effectively one of the worst climates that this country has seen in the history of its existence. I'm not going to get into the cognitive abilities of this president. In my opinion, I've been very clear. I think he has been the victim of elderly abuse. I don't support the constitutional amendment in terms of an age gap, or an age cap, I should say. There are a lot of men and women in this room who are 90 years old, or 80 years old, whatever number you want to choose, that are very capable of leading businesses. They're very capable of leading this country. They're very capable of serving in office. So it's not an age thing, it's a capability thing. I do support a cognitive test. I do think that you should have to prove to the American people from a mental capacity perspective that you have the ability to be present, to understand information as you're getting it, and have the wherewithal and the situational awareness to make executive decisions as the commander-in-chief, as the chief executive, and every other hat that the President of the United States makes before you are allowed to run and be electable, right? And I think that should be a recurring thing while you're in office. It's not an age thing. It's a mental capacity thing that I think is very important. I think it should apply to Congress too. Maybe we get half both sides of the 25th Amendment is not something that the legislative body and the Congress can invoke. It's not something we can push. There's silly, pushes for this from our end that people are messaging, and they don't understand what the Constitution says about it. At this point, we have an election coming up, and the people will decide, who they want to be in office, and that's where democracy functions. Okay? So, good question. All right, we got one more. We just have our. That's it. We're done. All right, no more questions. That's it. Come on.